All right, thank you very much, Joseph Alsain, for that background. We have guests with us here in the studios, as well as joining us via Zoom from outside of the country. First, let's welcome Nigeria's permanent representative to ECOWAS, Ambassador Musa Sani Nuhu. Ambassador Nuhu, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay. Also here with us in the studios, a regular, is Professor Abiodun Adeniyi of Mass Communication and Deputy Dean at School of Postgraduate Studies based University here in Abuja. Professor Adeniyi, we're glad to have you.
Thank you very much. Yes. My pleasure.
All right, we will also be joined by two very important guests via Zoom. Quickly introduced, joining us via Zoom from the UK, it's Paul Ejime. Paul Ejime is an international affairs analyst and a familiar face. Good morning and good to have you with us, Mr. Ejime.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Kingsley, and thank you, ambassadors.
All right, and of course, we would also be joined later on by Ambassador John Osanga, and he's the Nigerian ambassador to the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. He's also joining us via Zoom. Ambassador Osanga, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thank you so much, and good morning from Guinea-Bissau.
All right, maybe we should start with you, Ambassador Osanga. You know, being on ground at Guinea-Bissau. Just tell us, what was the feeling like when the President Tinubu was announced as chairman of the ECOWAS Commission during the session?
Yeah, it was very gratifying to to witness that experience, because it was for me it was very profound for all of us Nigerians. Because his emergence as the chair is giving a strong statement that the leadership of Nigeria in Africa, not just ECOWAS, is indisputable. Those who have doubted it before now have convinced themselves that Nigeria is the leading power in ECOWAS, and that Nigeria has the capacity to give direction, to ECOWAS and the rest of Africa. Because we are indeed a great nation. We have made huge sacrifices, to ensure the stability of ECOWAS and maintenance of law and order and security all over ECOWAS countries. For President Tinubu to be, so chosen at this point and on his very first outing is an experience that is unforgettable. It was for us a very, very good and something very good, gratifying to witness.
Ambassador Osanga, I still want to stay with you. Please explain to our viewers what it means to be chair of the ECOWAS authority, as such as President Tinubu is right now.
Yeah, in the simplest of terms, the chair of ECOWAS is like, can I say, the managing director of a company who is giving direction to the way the company should go. He brings to bear his vast experiences in management and in the political affairs to ensure that the ideals of ECOWAS, are achieved. He makes sure that all the things for which ECOWAS was set up is in line with whatever operational things that are being done, in either in the secretariat, in our relationship, and in other aspects. He just gives direction and leadership. And by leadership, I don't mean authority and subordination. It means being able to exert enough influence to carry everyone along in the path of the achievement of the protocols of the ECOWAS.
Okay, we'll just allow you to take a breath. We'll come back to the studio here and bring in our other guests into the conversation. Again, I'd like to bring in Ambassador Musa Sani Nuhu, who is Nigeria's permanent representative to the ECOWAS. And I'm just wondering, the position of chairman of the ECOWAS is rotationary, isn't it? Yes. What is the burden that President Tinubu would have to bear at this time?
Thank you very much. Yes, the position is rotational between the linguistic group of the organization. You will agree with me that we have 3 linguistic groups at the ECOWAS region, namely the Anglophone, the Francophone, and the Lusophone. For the first time, you recall last year, President Umaru Sissoco Embalo of Guinea-Bissau became the ECOWAS chair of Authority of Head of State and Government. That was the first time a Lusophone country was chairing the Authority of Head of State. So, on the procedure, normally, traditionally, member countries that wanted to chair the authority express interest writing to the commission, which will be circulated to member state. That has been the tradition. But I can tell you this time around, it wasn't that because Nigeria, President Tinubu didn't express interest for him to become the leader. It was the authority itself that decided to have a leader that they felt can provide the purposeful leadership that the organization need at the moment, and that was why they choose him to chair the authority at this period. Perhaps when it comes to what is expected from him, when you look at the outcome of the summit, the issues that were discussed and the decision taken by the head of state are essentially what is expected for him to implement. Political issues, the transition countries, the 3 transition countries, namely Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea, where we have coup d'etat, and there is need for the region to work closely with these military authorities and bring these countries back to constitutional rule. So he has that task on him. And then again, we are having so many security challenges in the region, especially the countries within the Sahel. Again, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, where at the moment over 50% of the country is under the control of the terrorists, not under the military government. And again, also in Niger, and you recall also in the northeast of Nigeria, where we also have the Boko Haram issue. So now the authority have taken a decision to collaborate and give that political will to ensure that these issues are addressed, because terrorism have no boundaries. They transcend from crossing our borders at will. So the region realized that we need to have a regional collaboration whereby the countries must work together to address the menace of terrorism. And in that regard, there is the regional action plan on fight against terrorism, which is a plan set up by the region to be implemented.
We will, Ambassador Nuhu, let's pause you in the meantime. We'll get into the details of what is facing ECOWAS right now and what mechanisms of framework are available to deal with those challenges. We want to bring in again another guest, this time also via Zoom. We earlier introduced him, Paul Ejime. Paul Ejime, of course, is joining us from the UK. Paul Ejime, let's back up a bit and go again to the election of President Tinubu as the chair of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government. Is it a charming time to chair the ECOWAS?
Thank you, Kingsley. Well, that's a very tough one. Well, in normal times, it's not easy to take charge of a country like as big as Nigeria, which is prospects, is progress and then challenges. But if you now have to add 14 other countries in the region, a region that is politically restive, a region that has many countries in the UN poverty circle of development, indices, and then challenges to democracy, or some people call it retreat or regression, then you will know what we're talking about. It's a Herculean task. So it couldn't have been, it's not normal times, it's tough. It's even tougher now. The ambassador there has mentioned the outcome of, or what was on the agenda, the usual things, peace and security, with the fact that 3 countries are now under military dictatorship. After all 15 had, over some years, enjoyed, a form of democracy or democratic system or another. So you see that they are going back. So there is a task now to bring them back. And then you saw the security issues where these Boko Haram in Nigeria, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and all manner of the Sahel, after the death of Muammar Gaddafi, has become a hotbed. In fact, it's an epicenter for all those all manner of armed groups to launch attack from one place to the other. And then you talk about the economic challenges. The whole world is facing economic crisis, but more so in West Africa. There's poverty, there is unemployment, there is restiveness. And then you talk about elections. We had President, by the way, congratulations to Nigeria, and then His Excellency President Tinubu for his mates, his colleagues finding him worthy. ECOWAS works through consensus, so there was no election there. His colleagues, heads of states, agreed that there must have been some, talk behind the scene. But when they came out, it was him that was chosen. So here, election in Africa, or more so in West Africa, have become a source of conflict, either drivers or triggers for conflict. And you also know that he's coming, his own election is still under challenge, and that of Sierra Leone that held the election recently. President Bio is also facing a challenge. But I heard him talk about rule of law. I think that is why he's, in spite of that, he believes that the rule of law should be followed through. Because without the rule of law, there is no democracy. I think these are the challenges. Of course, the usual, common currency keeps coming on. It's been appearing there like, rejected coin. Whether they will do something about it to make sure, because you need to have a unitary policy of all the countries, the monetary union, where they can now have a currency that will facilitate their the integration that they are talking about. There is free movement, and then a lot.
Mr. Jumet, thank you. Thank you very much. We'll get back to you. I know you're very vast in this area, but let's also bring in Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who is also Professor of Communication and Deputy Dean of School of Postgraduate Studies based University. And, well, Ambassador here told us that usually the routine is that, letters of interest, are indicated. But this time around, it wasn't so. There was no indication of interest, from our president. So there must have been something, that the, Committee of Heads of States, and governments had seen, in President Tinubu, that moved them to say, look, to have that unanimous decision, something we probably aren't seeing. And did we see this reflected, in the quality of Mr. President's speech?
Okay, yeah. I think there are also revelations from the submissions of the ambassador and Paul Ejime, who I believe was actually on ground, where the emergence happened. First, yes, there was supposed to be some signposting of interest, which probably didn't happen. At the end of the day, there was consensus among the head of state that, of course, they should concede it or cede it to our own president. Somewhat gratifying, and there are so many reasons why they might think like that. Ordinarily, organically, Nigeria is a very populous country, easily very influential in different ways. If a Nigerian president, muster substantial charisma, there are different ways in which he can help to galvanize respectability and reputation far beyond the West African sub-region, on the African continent, and even in the global community. And to some extent, we saw a revelation of the signaling of this tendency on the part of the president, considering his body language, the clouting that is sort of deplored in marshalling his point. I do not forget, we're talking about global international politics here, which is very delicate, which is very sensitive. It's not all the time that you want to put soldiers on the ground. It's not all the time that you want to rule out arms. So most of the time, diplomacy, should often be the key focus rather than war. And of course, within that matrix as well, especially when you are dealing with countries that you have the same horizontal relationship with, within that matrix there must be a tactics that you need to carefully deploy, and that tactics again will lead us again to the question of charisma, the question of clouting, the question of demonstrating, some potentials to resist any deviation from a tendency that the subgroup subscribe to. What the subgroup subscribe to largely is democracy, considering that we're in the 21st century, we're moving towards guaranteeing freedom of human rights, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, which is easily engendered or easily guaranteed by democracy. I will have some of our countries moving away from there, 3 countries, Mali, Guinea, and I think Burkina Faso. So if we're having this tendency, what do we do in the circumstance? Are we going to invade them? No. The only thing that the countries can do, is to be, is to be outspoken, to be very, very forthcoming and expressive, and sometimes even assertive, sometimes even theatrical in the way you do it, in the way you pronounce it, so that very appropriate meanings can be read, by those who want to potentially threaten democracy. One of the most vibrant periods we have had in Nigeria's foreign policy has actually been in the period of Murtala Obasanjo administration. And that period wasn't like they were going to war with foreign countries, but it was one of rhetorics, one of symbolism, one of optics, and sometimes retaliation. So those are the weapons, soft weapons, that you deploy in international diplomacy. And I saw the president largely threats, I will do this, I will fire a missile at America, I will do this. They may not even have the capacity. We're not justifying it, but symbolism matters to some extent.
How would you interpret that particular statement, Nigeria is back? Because it's a loaded statement, letting us know that we are back, we are moving away from the time of placidity, from the time where we were mere observers, where we were sucking up everything, watching smaller neighbors threatening us, where our citizens were being criminalized, where there was unbridled discrimination of the average Nigerian, to a time where we will resist these things, where we'll probably even retaliate, where we will now live up to expectations that yes, we're one of the most populous country on planet Earth, and if not the most populous in Africa, that want to live up to our expectation, and of course we want to harness the benefits that we have, to
assert our influence through the instrumentality of leadership. Because in all of these leadership matters, I mean, it's the springboard around which so many elements, so many sectors of the social system revolves around. And leadership is not necessarily physical, it's largely mental, and it shows again in how in the signs and symbols that you show to the populace through speeches and all of that.
All right, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, thank you very much there for your perspective. I've just been asking myself whether the question is appropriate now for Ambassador Nuhu, or I go back to Paul Ejime. But regardless, I will ask Ambassador Nuhu so that we can properly contextualize this latest development. It is the case that this is the third engagement, consecutive engagement of Nigerian leaders. Former President Goodluck Jonathan continues to head, or at some point headed, I'm not sure what the tenure is, the ECOWAS Committee of Elders. And he's played that role. And from time to time, when former President Muhammadu Buhari was in office, we saw him visit the villa to brief him on his activities for the ECOWAS sub-region. And President Buhari himself, when he was in office, because I recall we had that conversation on Good Morning Nigeria, I'm not quite sure if you were part of it, when Yahya Jammeh was trying to be funny with his continuity as president. They said that it was time for Nigeria to intervene, and Nigeria, of course, did intervene. Buhari was president at the time, decisively, as it were, and of course, Yahya Jammeh was shooed out, and I think he's somewhere in exile now, enjoying himself. But then we now have President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who has come on. Unfortunately, before his tenure, we saw the rollback of constitutional administrations in the sub-region. Mali fell, Burkina Faso fell, and then, of course, Guinea-Conakry, and all the tendencies towards tenure, elongation, and so on and so forth. You've been ambassador. What is happening to ECOWAS? Are there external forces that are drivers of this apparent instability? Managed, sapping the energies of others, including Nigeria, who would then seek to intervene and restore order.
You see, when Prof was making his intervention, he made mention of the statement where he said Nigeria is back. Perhaps, if you are going to analyze what happened in these countries where we have unconstitutional changes of government, in Mali first, before Guinea, Conakry, and Burkina Faso. In Mali, we can say is a number of factors that led to the coup d'etat, right from insecurity, the visible weakness of the government of Boubacar Keïta at that time, and then in Guinea Conakry, it's very clear. The former leader Alpha Condé changed constitution to start a third term, and which nobody was happy in the region, and then all the elements of the government becoming so weak were there. The same thing in Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso situation is almost similar with Mali because of the challenges of insecurity, and then the central government start to become weaker and weaker. But again, where ECOWAS should be relevant is because ECOWAS have so many legal instruments that address such issues, and they also have mechanisms which they are supposed to activate in addressing some of these issues. But the organization didn't do so. I can say that because when you have like preventive diplomacy measures which you can adopt in order to address some issues, and you didn't do that, you allowed issues to go beyond control. It's always difficult, and that was part of the statement which Mr. President made that Nigeria is back. You know, wherever you have regional integration, there must be a driver. There must be a champion who is driving it. When ECOWAS was ECOWAS, it was Nigeria that is given the purposeful leadership. It's the one driving the process. In Europe, why we are seeing European Union very intact, very strong, it was because of the leadership provided by Germany. In ASEAN, that is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, it was because of Indonesia, because it was the biggest economy, the largest and populous country in the region. They were the one that are providing leadership for ASEAN to be doing what it's doing today. Perhaps when President Tinubu mentioned that Nigeria is back, which means Nigeria is ready to provide that leadership expected from them. And the other states that were at the summit mentioned clearly that perhaps it's only Nigeria that can be able to champion West African regional integration and address all these issues, all these challenges, the unconstitutional changes of government, the insecurity issue, the economic issues. It's only if the strongest country in the region that will take that leadership position. And that was what he mentioned. He said clearly that he's ready for that. And perhaps out of wisdom of the head of state, when they realized all the challenges that we have, and they saw the charisma in Mr. President, they saw how assertive he is, ready to address issues, and the political will also is there in him. That was why they said, okay, they decided to appeal to him to take the leadership of the organization, which he willingly took to accept that, yes, he's ready for that.
Okay, Ambassador Nuhu, let me stay with you, because in his speech, President Tinubu outlined, key areas. He said he would tackle, of course, that the members of the community will tackle jointly. He mentioned the area of trade harmonization. He mentioned the area of security. He mentioned good governance. He mentioned harmonization of all the frameworks, within the instrument, that's the regional instrument. And these are all part of, the issues that the protocol, addresses. The protocol has protocol on good governance, protocol on peace and security. It has protocol on movement of goods, free movement of goods and services. Is it that the instrument is weak? Is it that it's not effective? I don't know. Where do we point at? What exactly is wrong with the instrument, with the ECOWAS as an integration instrument? Because I've been issued, it didn't set out to address political and conflict issues. Is it chewing more than it can bite?
No, I think, when ECOWAS was established in 1975, the purpose was for economic integration, enhanced trade between the various countries of the region, making sure that there is seamless economic activities between among member states. But later on, the organization mandate was expanded to include issues of political affairs, peace and security. And that was after the civil war in Liberia, and then ECOWAS have to revise the treaty. That is the 1993 revised treaty, which now a new department, even in ECOWAS, have to be created for political affairs, peace and security, because they felt that without political stability, without peace, without security, there is no way you can achieve economic integration, and which is very important. So that was 1993 through the revised protocol. But whenever a new chair is appointed, because ECOWAS they deal with all sectoral issues, be it issues like transport, aviation, health, education. They all deal with all various kind of issues of human endeavor. So whenever a president comes in, he set up a priority areas because they cheered for 1 or 2 years highest. We have history in Nigeria. Sometimes they chair for 2 years. Whenever head of state of Nigeria are sharing ECOWAS. So the head of state always come up with priority areas for them, for the region to know. During my tenure, and that was why Mr. President mentioned about deepening economic. He talked about strengthening the political institutions, respect for rule of law. He also
security.
And yes, that is having a safe West African region. And then he also talked about institutional matters whereby he will make sure that they strengthen the ECOWAS institutions in order to achieve the desire that they were established.
Okay, Ambassador Nuhu, thank you very much. Let's see if Ambassador Osaga is still there. Ambassador Osaga is in Guinea-Bissau, where we earlier took him for his initial comments. Ambassador Osaga, yes, we're glad to have you back. Now, tell us something. As part of the meetings on the sidelines, President Tinubu had an interaction with members of the Nigerian contingent who are still stationed in Guinea-Bissau. We know that Guinea-Bissau for a long time was in turmoil. What was that interaction like from your point of view, and what messaging should Nigerians also take from that?
Yeah, this is not the first time that Nigeria will provide military support for maintenance of peace and security in West Africa. We were involved in Liberia, we were involved in Sierra Leone. Even in Guinea-Bissau, Nigeria had, under the auspices of the ECOMIG, kept its troops from 2012 to 2020. And a measure of stability was attained until February 1st, 2022, when there was another attempt that would have been one of the bloodiest. And so Nigeria was the first to deploy when ECOWAS took the decision to deploy a stabilization force, to help maintain stability in the country, because it has been a very volatile place. And the troops were very excited to have their president visit them. I think it will be the first time that the force commander, who is also a Nigerian, said it will be the first time that their commander-in-chief would visit them outside the shores of the country. Many people spend their time in the military, never had one-on-one interaction with their commander-in-chief except their immediate commanders. So it was more for as a moral booster to the troops, who were very excited to have him, and he assured them. And the president also got to know that they have not owed them any allowance since their deployment. I assured them that the government was in full support of them, and he was proud of what they were doing because they have operated within the bounds of their mandate. In fact, they have also extended their mandate to provision of social services, for instance, medical support and stuff, under the same auspices of the ECOWAS. So the presence of the president to the troops was to just give them a moral boost in that Nigeria is with them, irrespective of whether they are at home or abroad. And that is, for me, is something that the military would take away and would encourage them to do more to ensure that their mandate is achieved.
Okay, Kingsley. Go ahead.
I wanted to appreciate Ambassador John Osaga for the perspective that he brought in there. But very quickly, Ambassador Osaga, as part of the meet from the conclusions of the summit, there are critical issues around regional integration, critical issues around the rollback in constitutional order in the sub-region. And President Tinubu was emphatic in emphasizing, again, let me just put that tautology there, that, look, there's no alternative to democratic order, which is, of course, underpinned by the rule of law. Is this going to be a mountain to climb, particularly for those three states that currently are not under constitutional rule, namely Mali, Conakry, and Burkina Faso?
Well, ECOWAS seriously frowns upon the unconstitutional assumption of power by any country whatsoever. There has been a consistent pressure on the three countries, to ensure that they return to civil rule. The processes are on, even though some measure of cooperation, is not easily achievable, because the operators, they are not working within the time frame given to them from all indications. But it is hopeful that the 2024 deadline for return to civil rule will be achieved. And that being the case, I think that President Tinubu is going to put much pressure on these people to return to civil rule. Why? Because he mentioned something about the ECOWAS standby force. Once the standby force is deployed, then they will have no choice than to, fall in line with the protocols or what is expected of them. It's not just about having people to, not assume power by force. It's also about looking at the issues that make them to assume power. What are those things that make assumption of power unconstitutionally easy for people to achieve? We're going to look at the economic aspects of the countries. We're going to look at foreign influences. Because like slavery in Africa was not something that people do just come and go into houses and pick people. Slavery was, made possible on account of the cooperation of Africans themselves. So we're going to look at the overbearing influences of foreigners who have interest in what is on the ground. And they're using some misguided elements, to cause instability. These are areas that the president is going to look into, because he has sent a warning that those exploiters, he sent a warning signal to the exploiters that it's no longer going to be business as usual. So non-friendly measures is going to be adopted to these countries that have refused to, abide by democratic principles. Once these non-friendly measures that are not violent, once these non-friendly measures are not achieving the intended purpose, then a deployment of the ECOWAS standby force might become necessary. And this is the way to make people fall in line, because advancement of democracy, security of lives and property are the only things that can guarantee peace in the ECOWAS sub-region. It has become a matter of focus attention on security issues more than the economic aspects. You find that in ECOWAS, the main purpose for which ECOWAS was set up has been kind of played in the background. Okay, we are very quick to deploy troops to countries that have instability. What about the deployment of the economic integration? What about aviation? What about connectivity? We are not going to achieve the economic prosperity for ECOWAS without sorting the matter of connectivity. How is it that we are not able to send Nigerian goods to countries along the west coast of Africa? Why must our goods go to Europe before coming to West Africa, for instance? Why do I have to enter to go to Cape Verde through Lisbon? Why is it easier for me to go to Cape Verde through Lisbon than to go to Cape Verde directly from here? A 3-hour flight from Lagos to Guinea-Bissau, for instance, will take you 10 to 12 hours, for instance. So until these connectivity issues are resolved, and until we are able to make this connection with ourselves, either by water, either by air, and by road, we are not going to see stability in the sense that we want to achieve, because stability.
All right, Ambassador Sangha, thank you. Thank you for the points that you've raised, and also for touching on the key objective of the ECOWAS instrument. And indeed, we cannot but, appreciate the connectivity or the nexus between, economic growth and political stability, especially within the sub-region. But it would appear that the quest to achieve political stability is almost, overshadowing the original intent, of the drafters of this ECOWAS instrument, and that is economic enhancement, to boost intra or inter trade among members. And if you compare the quality and amount of trade that is going on, among member states, it's far lower than when you compare, trade between member countries and other countries outside the region. And that's because the basic or major critical convergence, stages have also not been met. And we know what those stages are. The convergence, currency, the convergence of customs and institutions, the convergence of so many things. They are yet to be met. And this is almost 50 years since ECOWAS, was formed. Now, the President Tinubu is hoping to convene an extraordinary summit on trade and investment. How might this help to bolster trade among member countries? And my question is to Mr. Paul Ejime. I know this is an area that you've always talked about.
Yeah, Claire, thank you very much. And Kingsley, I hope that you'll actually give me some sufficient enough time to deal with some of the issues, because we keep putting them out there without really giving them sufficient analysis for those who are at home to understand. But we are talking about organizing a summit for economic advancement. But the big elephant is the fact that you cannot do. There is a symbiotic relationship between peace and security and then economic development and progress. You cannot do one without the other. But remember that ECOWAS, like Ambassador Nibu said, had to move from the core, agenda of economic integration because of the realities on ground. ECOWAS formed in 1975. By 1989, Liberia went into war. Charles Taylor, who is, by the way, now serving term in Scotland, for what happened in Sierra Leone, not what happened in Liberia. So this is the issue. We cannot run away from it unless you have the conducive atmosphere. No investor will come and invest in an, in crisis or a country in conflict. So you need to now address that conflict area, make sure that it's business friendly, before you can now talk about what you can do about advancing economically. I like the term when Ambassador Nu said Nigeria, ECOWAS when it was ECOWAS. Fine. And then the term also, Nigeria is back. When these issues were mentioned in the past, that Nigeria has been an observer, more or less, for an organization that is set up and was driving. Remove Nigeria from the equation, the war in Liberia and Sierra Leone will still be waging today. It's not Nigeria alone, but they had to galvanize other people to do it, Ghana and all that. And then, so Nigeria has to step up. It is not only in slogan, but you have to in the doing. And how do I mean? What are the causes of the reason the region is in crisis? You begin internally, nationally. Get it right. Nigeria cannot lead unless it has its own house in order. If you are going to have to chastise somebody about not doing certain things, make sure that you are not doing that, which you are trying to stop them from doing. So getting good governance, How does it happen? You need to run elections that are credible and transparent. The countries that are now having problems, one was the issue that some people, the leaders, wanted to go for third term, starting with President Ouattara of Cote d'Ivoire. He did it, and then the Condé in Guinea tried to do it, and you saw what happened. And then if politicians promise that they were going to do something, hold them accountable. Mali pays for that because the president there, when he won election, promised that he was going to tackle insecurity. He never did that. And the weapons that he had to fight insecurity, he used it against his people. When they went on the street to say, listen, you have not performed, he used it against them. That was why the military struck. And so on and so forth. If Kingsley will remember, in 2020, on that your studio, I was seated with Minister of State, Ambassador Dada, when it was just Mali that was where we had a coup. And I warned that unless the leaders came together, one is sincerity, one is commitment, and one is also being, respecting the rule of law. If you don't do that, we will continue to have these regressions. I told you, you even told me when I was advocating military dictatorship. I said no, but it was because there was no leadership in ECOWAS. The time that will rein in these people, because they are looking at your body language. And then there is also, don't forget, the external forces. Nigeria and, France has a preponderance of influence on what goes on in ECOWAS, using some of the countries, the former colonies. You have to watch out, because it's like, if you're the tail wagging the dog. You might have the best policy, but when in the implementation, if you don't take care of all these things, they are going to backfire. So these are the issues. Get it right internally, and then be able, Nigeria, leadership is earned. They are looking at your body language. They will ask you, well, if you're asking us to do this, have you done it at your home? These are the issues. Leading by example. Have a house, do the housekeeping to get it right, and then you will be able to get others to follow you. This is what is happening. Until and unless that is done, all they talk about, because it's not a question of lack of instruments or lack of protocols. Some of these protocols are not even implemented. That is it. And will we now have to deploy military or standby forces to all the countries? Ambalo himself barely survived the Guinea-Bissau where they held this. It was because there was an ECOWAS mission. The man in the Gambia is also standing in because there is ECOWAS mission. Why can't countries, leaders, talk to themselves to stop these political and electoral coups so that they will make military coups impossible? But forget my...
Paul, we apologize for that interruption, but we're having to take a short break now. When we return from the break, we'll continue with the conversation.
Nigeria means a lot to me.
And Nigeria means peaceful cohesion.
My country.
We continue to pray, and then hopefully we will come to understand that unity of purpose, unity of living together.
Our ethnic beliefs and background and culture is our strength.
Ever since the amalgamation period of 1914 to date, about 109 years ago, the people of Nigeria live very peacefully with one another.
I think diversity helps a lot to enhance robust development in Nigeria.
All over the country, you have so many ethnic groups, over 250. That is enough to tell you that this is a blessed country, and that God has kept together as one indivisible entity.
Your skill is key to your professional growth in the competitive broadcast media industry. Take advantage of the following programs specially packaged by NTA Television College Jos to upgrade your skill. Drama Production Workshop, date 3rd July to 21st July 2023, 3 weeks. Intermediate Online News Reporting Skills, date 24th July to 11th August 2023, 3 weeks. The course fee for the 2-week course is 120,000 Naira, while the fee for the 3-week course is 150,000 Naira only, accommodation inclusive. All courses will hold at NTA Television College near Old Government House, Rayfield, Jos. For further inquiries, please call 0803-079-5335 or 0806-980-9807. NTA Television College Jos, training you to be the best you want to be. Registrar Announcer.
We shall defend the nation from terror and all form of criminality that threaten the peace and stability of our country. Security shall be top priority of our administration, because neither prosperity nor justice can prevail amid insecurity and violence.
The counsel of our fathers.
I will urge and advise our younger generation to use talent and brain to sort out problems, not arms.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. I want to come back to Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Prof, Ejime made the point, and that's, of course, a re-emphasis of the valid proposition that peace and security are predicates for economic growth and development. When you take a look, for instance, at Mali and Burkina Faso, the instability in those two states is worrisome to anybody. I've sometimes asked myself, say, look, for the past decade or more, we've been pleading the collapse of the Gaddafi regime as one of the causative factors for the crisis in the Sahel and elsewhere. That's been a decade. I don't know how much armament Gaddafi stock while he was in power, and how much of it was lost once he was taken out of the scene. But could there also possibly be other external forces? Because the Malians literally told the French to say, look, enough of that, out of our sights. And we hear from time to time about the Russians. So are these forces ones that we, as a sub-regional entity, can't contend with, or are there other ways we could possibly seek to outflank them so that there is greater peace? In Mali, let's be realistic. Outside of Bamako and one or two other places,
there's no peace anywhere else.
But where is the peace? And Burkina Faso almost tending towards the same thing. Yes, Prof.
Yeah, fundamental question, no doubt. But before I, give my view on your question, let me just go back a little bit to what we're talking about appropriate messaging on the part of leadership. That was partly demonstrated by President Bola Tinubu in Guinea. Sometimes it's not about what leaders say that matters; it's about how they say it. And before now, we have had concerns, about the rendition style of the president, until Guinea, where we now saw a complete departure, showing us that, okay, he can also present some other kind of variant. And we saw that forceful presentation, that charismatic presentation, we send some kind of message that we are really ready to do what we want to do. And of course, even in the global circles, we see that some nations have assumed the position of leadership only because of the rhetorical prowess of their leaders, and how at moments in time they deliver. perhaps is one strategy. We'll be hoping that Nigeria, in leading ECOWAS, will adopt, in bringing about, improvement or mitigation in some of these problems that we are highlighting, including the one you just mentioned, which takes me back to your question, sir. And of course, it's just trite, to say that we cannot be talking about progress or capital development, in the absence of peace, because naturally economics will say that capital takes flight, where there is peace, or money runs away from crisis, because investment is dependent on peace for the multipliers to be triggered, for there to be sustenance of productivity and efficiency, as the case could be. But again, we cannot deny the fact that our structures and institutions in Africa have been historically weak. Oftentimes, we raise argument around colonialism or raise argument around neocolonialism, which is becoming jaded now because of the examples of countries in Asia and the South Pacific that were once at par with, but have, through the instrumentality of dependent development or learning from learning from the development strides of the West, have actually been able to also bring about development in their area. So if these ones were able to do it, these ones that were once made, then why can't we do it? But our tragedy is probably, again, comes back to leadership. But other than our leadership, our institutions are still weak, the structures are still weak, and because of declining resources as well, you begin to fear that this kind of crisis is going to continue for a long time more. And that's why it is gratifying to see sister African countries, sister countries within the sub-region, coming to tell, these ones that are deviating from the norm, that it's not something that is sustainable, it's not something we're going to accept. In the case of Mali, the case of Guinea, the case of Burkina Faso, will continue to be in focus, because they are outliers that, if they are allowed to stay, can rub off on other West African nations, because the threats are there, the institutions that are weak are there, and they can be inviting, for any kind of individual that may want to be adventurous with power. But what do we do in this circumstance? Maybe, again, continue to stay, continue to have focus, keep an eye on the vision and mission. The citizenry too should be galvanized towards pressing for continuous good leadership, good governance, as the case could be.
Thank you, Professor Abiodun. Ambassador No, I don't know how to put this question, but I'm wondering, apart from institutional weakness, are there other reasons why trade, among members within the sub-region is not happening? Because if you consider the fact that poverty is rising significantly in almost all the countries. I mean, you have the poorest of the poor countries, situated within the sub-region. You also look at the rate of, taxation and all that. One begins to wonder whether, any of these states would be able to meet the convergence, benchmarks, for ECOWAS to achieve its purpose of one people. And I'm just wondering, what can be done, or what is ECOWAS doing, to address, that gap?
Thank you very much for this question. It's very important. The level of trade between countries in the West African sub-region has been a source of concern. At best, we only have 15%. At the moment, it's hovering around 12%. That is when the country started to recover after COVID.
That's the volume of trade?
Yes, just 12% volume of trade between the member countries. But we believe that there is so much informal trade that is not being captured. The statistics is not being captured. And recently, there was an effort by the ECOWAS Commission in order to ensure that informal trade are captured into our statistics. Let me give you one example. Just last month, a group of Nigerians came to us for guideline on how they will be exporting their onions through formal way to other West African countries. They mentioned that each month they export about 250 to 300 load of trucks of onion that leave Sokoto market to up to Cote d'Ivoire. And on each truck they spend 1.6 million naira on extortion, not going to government. So we have what we call the ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, which Nigeria is championing because about 65% of the countries registered companies registered under that scheme are Nigerian companies. We have about almost 3,900 companies, Nigerian companies that are registered under the ETLF scheme. And we have over 10,000 products that are under the scheme. What this scheme provides is every company that registered under the scheme, once you produce those items in any West African country, they can be sold in other West African countries without payment of custom duty or any other levy, which means those goods that are produced in the region, they are free to move into other West African countries. So, but we are not taking leverage on that scheme, because while doing that, countries still used to block their roads. We have seen even ourselves too, we cannot exonerate ourselves, because there was a time Nigeria closed its borders for over 1 year, which is against that ECOWAS protocol and ETLS scheme. So back to the onion producers. When we went to Sokoto to just verify what they are doing, we discovered that yes, they have this capacity, and we guided them on how they can register those products so that they can move freely to other West African countries. Because when they leave Sokoto, they pass through Niger, Benin, Togo, Ghana, up to Cote d'Ivoire. But before they reach their destination, they are complaining they will spend 1.6 million. Now, one of the important decisions taken by this summit was to address all obstacles on trade, remove those barriers.
This administration?
Yes. No, the summit that just finished in Guinea-Bissau. There's a task force, an ETLS task force, presidential task force they call it, and it is headed by a very experienced diplomat, Mohamed Bin Chambers, who was a former president of the ECOWAS Commission. He was former Secretary General of Commonwealth, former special representative of the United Nations, Secretary General in West Africa and Sahel. So he is very experienced, and he has started engaging member states to address these issues. In fact, the biggest corridor in West Africa is the Lagos-Abidjan corridor, where about 65 to 70% of trade in the region is carried out along that corridor. So, and most of the challenges are on that corridor. So now there is going to be a meeting of ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of trade, ministers of finance, and the custom chiefs, the custom controller generals of these our countries within that corridor, to address these challenges.
And Ambassador Nuhu, I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you short. We're getting pressed for time. I'm still staying with you because all of these issues that you have raised, they are important, and happily, probably there are pathways now to resolving whatever logjams there are. But, excuse me, a critical issue as well has to do with the finances of ECOWAS itself. Nigeria has, to a considerable extent, often borne the burden, the financial burden of running the entity. And, excuse me, and if you remember, of course you do remember, for many years there was a debate about the reduction of the size of the commission, the number of commissioners you would have. I think that the issue of the finances came up, but it didn't appear to have grabbed the headlines at this summit. Is ECOWAS as a body now, as an international institution, is it in a heavier financial state, or he still needs to worry about his finances? And if he needs to worry about his finances, where is help likely to come from?
You know, let me give you a little background before answering your question.
Yes.
The practice in international organizations was member states pay access contribution. They were charged based on based on the strength of their economy. And ECOWAS came up with an initiative, a very good innovation, back in 2001, to introduce community levy as a means of funding the organization. What does that mean? Goods that are imported into West Africa from third countries, that is outside the region, attract 0.5% levy. And that levy is paid straight to ECOWAS. That is how ECOWAS funds itself, not through access contribution. And that was that initiative was able to now be able to mobilize resources for the running of the organization. Through that, the organization was able to have a lot of programs that it is implementing. When it comes to resource mobilization, ECOWAS is doing better than even African Union. I can tell you this. ECOWAS is doing better when it comes to mobilize the resources. But again, Nigeria have some concern on that, because these are money that are generated through tax. Because of our population, our high consumption, we expect a lot of money to be generated from Nigeria. And then when Nigeria realized that in terms of implementing programs that will have direct positive impact on the citizens of the community, since you are now taxing the citizens of the community, the ordinary person on the street, need to be seeing what ECOWAS is doing, need to be feeling ECOWAS. And that was why Nigeria said ECOWAS must carry out institutional reform. That involved the reduction of the size of the tough, heavy structure that they have, which was just concluded last year. Now ECOWAS have a very lean structure with only 5 commissioners at the ECOWAS Commission. Only 5 against 13 they used to have before. And thanks to Nigeria, because it was Nigeria that stood its ground that institutional reform must be carried out. And Mr. President, while making his acceptance speech now, even in Bissau, he mentioned the continuation of the implementation of that reform, because we only finished the structural adjustment. What about, that is the organogram, what about the operational cost, which is the next stage of the institutional reform that
let's quickly, Professor Abiodun, just in two minutes, if you may, let's talk about the operationalization of the ECOWAS standby force, which Mr. President talked about, against terrorism. What are we likely to expect? What are we to expect?
Yeah, well, from my understanding, what it means is that there will be some boots that will be ready to get on ground whenever there are threats by terrorists in any area of the ECOWAS operation. But this, I again know that can be very, very complicated, because no individual West African country has been able to contain terrorists, irrespective of the potency of their own force. And so if they are now coming together, it means that the terrorists might as well think about coming together. And we're in an age of increasing sophistication of non-state actors. Their complexities can come in different ways, remembering that the way in which they fight is not just symmetrical. They use asymmetrical means, which can be very disruptive to state processes. It can be complicated, but I want to believe that there will be a lot of planning, there will be a proper arrangement, before this kind of force can be ready to go into action.
All right, Kingsley, how?
Well, that's the end, as it were, of our conversation segment. Of course, we always return to ECOWAS issues. We'd like to appreciate all our guests who've been with us this morning. From Guinea-Bissau, we're joined by the Nigerian ambassador to that country, Ambassador Join Usanga. Ambassador Join Usanga, we really appreciate your contribution to our conversation this morning. From the UK, you see him there on the right side of your split screen with Paul Ejime, International Affairs Analyst, because an expert on ECOWAS affairs. Paul, there will always be time for you to speak, so thanks a lot for being our guest this morning. Here in the studios in Abuja, we thank Professor Abiodun Adeniyi of Bayes University, where he is Deputy Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies.
Thank you.
And also a deep appreciation to Ambassador Musa Sani Nuhu, Nigeria's permanent representative to ECOWAS. Ambassador, thanks for being with us. Let's go over now to our sports desk.